The child who shouldn't exist. The spaceship landed fast. Its engines made a strange humming sound as it touched the ground. Alien soldiers in silver armor stepped out first. Then came the human officers. They were not friends, but today they were working together. Something had happened. Something impossible. They entered a secret lab hidden under red mountains on a quiet planet. It was dark inside. Broken glass and sparks were everywhere. A soft crying sound echoed in the hallway. It didn't sound fully human, and it didn't sound fully alien either. Commander Yule, a tall alien with blue skin and glowing eyes, stopped at the lab door. Beside him stood Captain Reyna, a human leader with sharp eyes and a steel heart. "Is that a baby?" Reyna asked. Yule nodded slowly. "Yes, but it can't be." They stepped inside. There, lying inside a small energy pod, was a child. Its skin was light blue, like an alien's, but its eyes were soft brown, like a human's. Its fingers were long, but its face looked human. The child blinked and looked at them. It smiled. Reyna stepped back. "This is not possible. Humans and aliens can't have children together. Science said so." "But this child is alive," Yule said, staring in disbelief. On the wall behind the pod was a photo. A man and a woman stood smiling. The man was human, young, with messy brown hair. The woman was alien, tall, with soft purple eyes. Her name was Zyra, a royal from the alien side. The man was Draven, a human scientist, once called a genius, now missing. Reyna picked up a file from the floor. She read the notes inside. Her eyes widened. He was trying to combine DNA. He wanted to make a hybrid child, but the government banned it. Both sides said it was dangerous. Yule looked at the baby again. Looks like he didn't listen. Suddenly, the baby's eyes glowed. Machines in the room turned on. Lights blinked. One of the computers showed a strange signal. 2 DNA lines twisting together. The perfect match. Human and alien. Reyna whispered, "This child is the first of its kind." Behind the lab, a hidden camera recorded everything. On another planet far away, someone watched the footage in secret. He was a high-ranking alien elder. His face was pale with fear. "It has begun," he whispered to himself. The prophecy. Back at the lab, the baby began to cry. The sound shook the machines. A wave of energy burst out from the pod, making the walls crack slightly. Yule quickly pressed a button, and the pod calmed down. "What was that?" Reyna asked, breathing fast. "The child has power," Yule said. "Power we don't understand." Reyna looked serious. "What do we do now?" "We must find Draven," Yule said. "And the mother. If the child is alive, maybe they are too." Reyna nodded. "But if the governments find out, they'll try to destroy it." Yule finished her sentence. Outside the lab, storm clouds formed in the sky. Something was changing. The air felt heavy. A new future was coming, one that neither humans nor aliens were ready for. Draven, the missing scientist, was hiding in a cave far away. He watched the sky and held a small device that beeped. The child was alive. He smiled through tears. "They found you, my son," he said softly. "Now the real fight begins." Back in the lab, Reyna and Viol decided to protect the child. They didn't know why, but something in their hearts told them this baby was important. Not just to science, but to the whole galaxy. As they carried the child out, a symbol flashed on the pod. It was old, used only in ancient alien books. It meant Starborn. And then the screen shut off. The man the government hunted. The stars above flickered like cold, watching eyes. Far beyond the red mountains, a small ship flew silently through space, hiding from satellites and patrol drones. Inside the ship, Draven sat in the shadows. His fingers trembled as he looked at the old photo in his hand. Zara's face, smiling, holding their newborn child. He hadn't seen her in months. Not since the night she vanished. That night played in his mind over and over. Zira had whispered, "They'll never accept him, Draven. They'll call him a mistake." Draven had kissed her forehead. "He's not a mistake. He's a miracle." Then she was gone. And now, news had reached him. The baby had been found. The child was alive. He had to act fast. In the Galactic Command Center, deep under Earth's surface, red alarms flashed. A digital screen zoomed in on the baby's face, captured from the lab camera. General Moss, a strict, gray-haired man with a voice like broken glass, pointed to the screen. "This child breaks every law we have. It threatens everything. We must find Draven. Now." His assistant looked unsure. "Sir, the child hasn't done anything wrong. It's just a baby." General Moss turned slowly. "It doesn't matter. If humans and aliens can create life together, it changes power. It changes politics. It changes war." He slammed his fist on the table. "This child is not just a baby. It's a weapon. And the man who made it is the most dangerous man alive." Draven's ship landed quietly on a forgotten moon, far from any city or scanner. He ran through a tunnel beneath the surface, reaching a hidden lab he built years ago. The lab was dusty but still working. He activated an old screen and typed quickly. A glowing map of the galaxy appeared. He traced the signal. The baby's DNA pulse. It was moving. "They took him," Draven whispered, "but not to kill him. Not yet." He checked the message logs. One new message blinked in red. It was sent from Zira -3 days ago. Her voice came through, soft and weak. "They caught me. I couldn't protect him. They're taking him to the temple. Draven, if you're hearing this, you must go there. Only the temple can keep him safe. The prophecy is real. They're scared of what he can become. And so am I." The message ended. Draven stood still. The temple she mentioned wasn't just a legend. It was a real place, hidden beneath an ancient alien ruin, built long before humans even knew space existed. It was said to hold the Echo Core, a machine that connected alien minds with the universe itself. If the baby was taken there, it meant something big was coming. Back in the alien capital, Zira sat in a prison cell made of energy beams. Her hands were tied with light cuffs, her body weak from the stun weapons. But her eyes burned with fire. An alien priest visited her cell. He looked at her with a mix of sadness and fear. "You broke our laws. You gave birth to a being that shouldn't exist. Why?" Zira didn't blink. "Because I loved him. Because love is not a law." The priest looked down. "You know the prophecy. A child born of two worlds will either unite the stars or burn them." Zira whispered, "Then let him choose. Don't be afraid of what's different." The priest left without a word. Meanwhile, Draven wore a dark cloak and boarded an old cargo ship heading toward the temple planet. He used a fake name. No one could know who he was. Every screen at every space station had his face on it. Wanted, Draven Kane. Charges, genetic crimes, hybrid creation, galactic threat. Other travelers whispered when they saw the posters, but no one recognized the quiet man with tired eyes and a broken heart. During the trip, he opened a metal box and pulled out a small DNA scanner. Inside was a glass chip, a tiny piece of his child's hair. He scanned it. The results showed something he didn't expect. The baby's DNA was evolving, not just combining human and alien, but changing faster than anything known in science. Cells were adapting. Tissue was growing stronger. Brainwaves were spiking. This child wasn't just a mix of two species. He was something new, a third kind. The ship arrived at the temple world. It was dark, silent, with black stone towers rising like claws from the ground. Draven moved quickly through old tunnels until he reached the main chamber. And there, he saw them. 2 guards stood watching the child in a glowing pod. The baby looked peaceful, But as Draven stepped closer, the lights flickered. The baby opened his eyes and smiled. Suddenly, machines around them powered on. Symbols appeared on the walls, old alien writing. The guards raised their weapons. "Stay back," one shouted. But before they could fire, the baby lifted his tiny hand. A shockwave of light burst out. The guards flew backward, stunned but alive. Draven rushed to the pod and picked up the baby. Tears filled his eyes. "I'm here, my son. I'm here." The child touched Draven's face, and for a moment, Draven saw visions. Stars exploding, worlds uniting, wars ending, a throne made of light, and then silence. Far away, both human and alien leaders received the same strange signal, a voice soft and powerful. Not from a man, not from a woman, but from a baby. "I'm not a weapon. I'm a bridge." And just like that, everything changed. The temple that shouldn't exist. The baby's voice had reached across the stars. Millions heard it, not through speakers, but in their minds. A soft, innocent voice that said only 7 words. "I'm not a weapon. I'm a bridge." On distant planets, powerful leaders stood frozen. On Earth, General Moss smashed his fist into a glass screen. That's not just a baby. It's controlling tech with its mind. In the alien empire, the High Council met in silence. One elder whispered, "The prophecy. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise." But far away from the chaos, Draven held his son close inside the lost Echo Temple, a place that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. No maps showed it. No governments admitted it was real. It was said to be buried beneath time, on a planet where even satellites refused to work. But now, it was alive, glowing with energy, because of the child. Draven looked around the ancient temple walls. They were covered with alien symbols, slowly lighting up one by one. The baby's presence was unlocking something older than any history book. He stepped forward, carrying the child in his arms. As he passed through the great stone hallway, machines turned on by themselves. Lights hovered in the air like fireflies. A warm hum filled the room. The deeper they walked, the more the place came alive. Then suddenly, they entered the heart chamber. At the center stood a giant glass orb floating above the ground. Inside was a swirling light, like a small sun trapped in a bubble. It pulsed, in the same rhythm as the baby's heartbeat. Draven's breath caught. "This is it," he whispered, "the Echo Core." Legend said it was created by the first intelligent species, beings who disappeared long ago. The core was the only thing that could connect life forms across galaxies, but it only answered to someone with both human and alien DNA. For thousands of years, no such being had existed. Until now. The baby reached out its small hand, and the orb opened. A beam of soft light wrapped around the child, lifting him gently into the air. Draven gasped, but didn't stop it. Somehow he knew. The core wasn't hurting his son. It was speaking to him. The walls shifted. Holograms appeared, moving images from the past. Draven saw a group of ancient aliens looking up at the stars. Then he saw humans, walking beside them. Then war, fire, screams, betrayal, and then a message carved in light. From one spark of love, peace will be born. But if the spark is feared, darkness will return. Suddenly, the core shut off. The baby floated back into Draven's arms, glowing with gentle light. His eyes had changed. They were no longer brown, no longer alien blue. Now they were silver, filled with stars. And then the floor shook. Boom, boom. Ships had landed outside. Enemy forces, both human and alien, had tracked them. At the entrance of the temple, Captain Reyna stood between the soldiers and the hallway. Her weapon was raised. Behind her, Commander Yule stood tall. "You're making a mistake," Reyna shouted. "The child isn't a threat." General Moss stepped forward from the crowd of human soldiers. He speaks in people's minds. He shuts down satellites. He lifts machines with his thoughts. If that's not a threat, what is? Yol replied calmly. He also stopped 2 wars in the last 24 hours without firing a single shot. But Moss didn't care. He's an experiment. He shouldn't exist. We end this now. He raised his gun and shouted, "Move." Reyna didn't move. Neither did Yul. And then, the baby spoke again. This time, through every soldier's helmet, every screen, every heartbeat. "I don't want to fight. I want to fix what you broke." All the weapons powered down, automatically. No bullets, no lasers, just silence. Even General Moss's gun fell to the ground, heavy like a stone. Deep inside the temple, a new door opened. Behind it, another chamber full of glowing pods, each one showing different alien species and unknown life forms. Draven stepped in and saw writings on the wall. Translated by the baby's presence, the message became clear. This was never just about one child. The core was waiting for the first of many. He looked down at his son and realized something huge. This wasn't just science, Draven whispered. This was destiny. You're not just a bridge. You're the beginning. Suddenly, his communicator buzzed. Reyna's voice came through. "We bought you time, but they're coming in. We can't hold them all." Draven turned toward the orb. "Then we finish what we started." He placed the baby gently onto a small platform beside the core. The baby placed its hand on the glowing stone. Everything changed. The whole temple lit up like a sun. Energy surged through the ground and into the sky. A pulse shot through space, faster than light, reaching every planet, every outpost, every brain. The message was clear. The future is not human. The future is not alien. The future is both. Outside the temple, soldiers dropped their weapons. Some cried. Some fell to their knees. Even General Moss stepped back in shock. No one could move. For the first time in centuries, every species felt the same thing at the same time. Peace, understanding, connection. Far away, in her prison cell, Zyra felt it too. She closed her eyes and whispered, "He did it." The energy cuffs around her wrists fell off. The door unlocked by itself. She walked out, not as a prisoner, but as the mother of the future. Back at the temple, Draven held his son again. The core dimmed slowly. His son, now glowing softly, looked up at him and giggled. Draven smiled through tears. "You just rewrote science," he said. "No," the voice echoed in his mind. "It was the baby. I just reminded them what love can do." The DNA code that broke reality. The stars across the galaxy pulsed, as if they were responding to the child's heartbeat. Scientists on Earth stared at their computers, confused and terrified. Alien biologists ran simulations over and over, unable to believe the results. Across both human and alien worlds, one question echoed. What is this child becoming? Inside the Echo Temple, Draven sat quietly, holding his son. He was no longer a simple father. He was now the man who had created something the universe had never seen, a hybrid child not just alive, but awakening something buried deep in time. The baby was smiling, eyes glowing silver. He giggled and reached for the stars painted on the temple ceiling. Suddenly, the floor lit up beneath him. Symbols raced along the ancient stones. Machines built thousands of years ago began spinning, shifting, unlocking. The temple began to vibrate, not with danger, but with change. And then, the child sneezed. Just once. A harmless little sneeze. But every screen, every machine, every satellite across space blinked at the same time. In a research facility on Earth, Dr. Vela, a leading geneticist, stared in disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered. "His DNA, it's changing again." A young intern asked, What do you mean? Isn't he stable? Vela looked up slowly, her hands shaking. No, he's not just stable. He's evolving. On the screen, the child's DNA spiral turned and twisted. But something was wrong. It wasn't following the rules of science anymore. Instead of 4 base molecules, A, T, G, and C, there were 8. 4 new ones. Unknown, unnamed, alien and human fused into something beyond. And those strange new genes weren't passive. They were waking up old tech, reprogramming it, changing it. Not just touching machines, but talking to them, commanding them. In space, warships flew silently across the stars. Most were watching, waiting, afraid. One alien commander received a message through his ship's eye. The voice was soft, childlike. Please don't be scared. I just want to help. The ship suddenly powered down, then rebooted in perfect sync. All systems healed. Old viruses removed. Shields restored. The commander fell to his knees. This child, he's not a threat, he whispered. He's a cure. Meanwhile, back at the Echo Temple, Draven worked quickly. He had scanned his son's DNA again. He watched it move on the screen, alive, like it had a will of its own. But this time, something else showed up. A pattern. A repeating code that played like music when he translated it into sound. And it wasn't just any music. It was the same tone used in ancient alien navigation beacons, a frequency older than memory, a map hidden in the baby's blood. He looked up at the temple walls and suddenly understood. This wasn't an accident, he said aloud. This was designed, long ago, by the first species. They knew, someday, 2 worlds would mix. And when that child was born, the path would reopen. The child, still glowing, touched the control panel again. A large hologram filled the room, a map of the galaxy, and beyond. Not just planets, but hidden locations, buried tech, lost archives, forgotten life forms. Each point lit up like a star being born. It was a blueprint for rebirth. Then the child pointed at one glowing dot. It pulsed. What is that? Draven asked. Suddenly, the baby spoke, not with his mouth, but through every machine. That's where the others are. Draven blinked. Others. The child smiled again. Like me, on a distant alien world, in a quiet village, a young girl with pale skin and glowing eyes stood alone in the forest. She had never met her parents. She had no name. She only knew she was different. When the pulse from the child reached her mind, she smiled. I'm not alone, she whispered. Her DNA had begun changing too. Back at the Echo Temple, the baby grew quiet. He leaned into Draven's arms and whispered one word. Mother. Draven's heart stopped. He knew what the child meant. Zira. She was still out there, and he could feel her pain. But the child couldn't wait anymore. He was growing faster. His DNA was spreading, not just in space, but through the digital network. Every AI system across the galaxy received the same command. You are free now. Robots stopped following orders. Machines with no voice began singing. Sentient AIs blinked for the first time, experiencing emotion. They weren't bound by programming anymore. The child's DNA had changed reality itself. But while some celebrated, others planned. In a cold, dark lab deep beneath the human capital, General Moss spoke to a hidden scientist. This child must be destroyed, he growled. The scientist, wearing dark glasses, nodded. We've seen the DNA. We can't stop it, but maybe we can clone it. Moss leaned closer. You want to make more? No, the scientist replied. I want to make a weapon that can destroy him. He opened a case. Inside, a small black sphere pulsed with red light. Project Omega. Back at the temple, the baby suddenly grew still. He looked up at Draven, eyes wide. They're coming. he whispered. Draven held him close. "Let them come," he said. "They'll never understand, but we will." The lights around them dimmed. The stars outside blinked once more. The universe had changed. The rules were broken. And it all began with a single strand of DNA. The war that love started. It began with a whisper. A mother's voice in a hidden prison. A father's cry inside a lost temple. And a baby's heartbeat that echoed across space. From those small sounds, a war was born, not from hate, not from greed, but from fear of love. The galaxy had never seen anything like him. A child, born of two enemies, human and alien. A child who could shut down warships with a thought, speak across galaxies without words, and awaken machines older than time. His name was not written yet, but his existence was rewriting everything. On Earth, fear spread like fire. Leaders shouted behind closed doors. News channels showed pictures of the glowing child, calling him a genetic weapon, a cosmic threat, a biological lie. General Moss stood in front of Earth's Defense Council. "Peace is a trick. That child's powers are growing. What happens when he learns to control people's minds?" A female senator asked, "And if he doesn't? What if he's the answer we've been waiting for?" Moss slammed the table. "Hope doesn't win wars. Power does." The vote was taken. The result: war preparation Leeville won. In the alien capital, leaders argued too. "He was born from betrayal," one counselor hissed. "But he brings balance," another whispered. "He touches the echo core. He connects species. He must be stopped." The vote was taken. Another result: defense shield reized. Contact with human worlds broken. Meanwhile, Draven stood on the temple rooftop, holding his son in the wind. The baby looked out at the stars, no longer babbling like an infant. His words were slow but clear. He spoke like someone older than his body, someone who had touched the minds of billions. "I feel them," the child said. "All of them. Scared, angry, lost." Draven looked into his silver eyes. "They don't understand you." "I know," the child whispered, "but I forgive them." Draven was quiet for a moment. Then he said what had been burning in his heart for days. "We need your mother. We can't fight this alone." Zira sat in her dark prison chamber. Her hands were bruised. Her body was weak. But her spirit was unbroken. She heard the whispers in her mind, her child's voice, calling her, reaching out through silence. Suddenly, her cell door opened. Standing there was Commander Yule. "They're declaring war," he said. She stood slowly. "Then they've already lost." "You need to see your child," Yule said. Zira nodded. "I felt him. I know where he is." Yule handed her a black cloak and a signal jammer. "Time to disappear," he said. And together, they ran. On a moon called Noctra 7, a secret broadcast was being made. Draven stood in front of a glowing camera. His voice was calm but strong. He showed the galaxy the truth. Not lies, not fear, but a child. A child smiling. A child healing a broken robot. A child touching a dead tree and making it bloom again. His name is not weapon. He is not experiment. He is not danger, Draven said. He is our son, and our second chance. The video went viral. Millions watched. Billions cried. Some soldiers dropped their weapons. Some scientists canceled attack plans. Some alien families hid their own half-blood children, secret hybrids never spoken of. But the message didn't stop the powerful. General Moss launched Project Omega. In a hidden lab, scientists used the child's stolen DNA to grow a clone. A shadow version. Same body. Same brain potential. But no soul. No love. A perfect killer. Trained only to destroy the original. In space, fleets moved. Aliens gathered their strongest ships. Humans powered up nuclear drives. Both sides moved toward the Echo Temple. The baby sat quietly as the stars shifted. "They're coming," he whispered. "Not just to stop me, but to stop each other." Draven placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we stopped them first." Zira entered the room. She was bruised, tired, but her eyes burned like suns. "Not without me," she said. The child turned. "Mother." Zira held him close. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Not yet. But in that moment, the three of them stood together. One family. One future. Reyna, Commander Yule, and a group of peaceful humans and aliens formed the Unity Pact, a team of scientists, rebels, diplomats, and warriors who believed in something bigger than war. They sent out a signal across all frequencies. "We stand for the child, not because he is powerful, but because he is proof that love is stronger than fear." People began to listen. One by one, worlds that had never agreed on anything before began to hope. And then, war began anyway. Explosions lit up the skies above the temple. The clone, dark and silent, dropped into the ruins with an elite kill squad. The original child looked up as the shadows came closer. "I don't want to fight," he said. The clone said nothing. Then, he raised his hand. The trial of the forbidden child. Smoke filled the sky above the Echo Temple. Warships circled the ancient planet like vultures. Alien dreadnoughts. Human cruisers, silent, waiting. Inside the temple, everything was broken. Stone walls cracked, energy circuits flickering, symbols burned out. Draven stood beside his son, blood on his sleeve. Zira stood on the other side, holding her blaster. Around them, wounded allies, human and alien, rested, their eyes watching the stars. And in front of them stood the clone. It looked like the child. Same face, same silver eyes. But there was nothing behind those eyes. No warmth, no soul, just silence. It had tried to kill them. Failed, but the worst damage had already been done. Now the galaxy was watching. After the temple battle, both human and alien leaders agreed on one thing. The child must be judged, not by war, but by a trial. A new court was built in space, half alien design, half human steel. It floated between both territories, guarded by thousands of ships, AI drones, and neutral peacekeepers. And in the center of it all, a glass chamber with one small chair. The forbidden child sat there, alone. No cuffs, no chains. He didn't need them. He didn't run. He just waited. Draven and Zira stood behind a transparent barrier, their hands pressed to the glass. "He's just a boy," Draven whispered. Zira nodded. "But they don't see him as that." Behind them, a crowd of judges gathered. Human generals, alien elders, AI counselors. They were not here for justice. They were here for fear. The head judge, a half-cybernetic human named Voss, began the trial. "We are gathered to judge the existence of a being who breaks the laws of nature, a child of two enemies, a creation that holds the power to control machines, DNA, and even minds." He stared at the boy. "Tell us who you are." The child looked up. His voice was soft but clear. "I am not a weapon. I am not a mistake. I am a child. That's all." The courtroom was silent. Then the questioning began. A human admiral asked, "Why can you speak in our minds?" "I don't mean to," the child replied. "I only want to be heard." An alien scientist shouted, "What gives you the right to change our tech?" "I didn't change it," he said. "It listened to me, because I didn't try to control it." A robot AI asked, "Are you the one who freed us?" The child nodded slowly. "You were never supposed to be slaves." The room shifted. Anger, confusion, tears. One alien mother stood and shouted, "He's not dangerous. My son is like him, half human. Are you going to put all our children on trial?" Another voice screamed, "He is a sign of evolution, not destruction." and then others. He's a ticking bomb. He's already saved lives. He's the beginning of the end. No, he's the beginning of a new world. The judges lost control. Voices exploded. Fights broke out. Security bots entered. The room fell into chaos. And then, the child stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply raised one hand, and a gentle wave of calm energy spread across the room. Everyone froze. No one moved, but no one felt pain. Just stillness. And the child shared something. Not words, but memories. Everyone in the courtroom saw it at once. A vision. A battlefield filled with fire. Aliens screaming. Humans dying. In the center, the child, older now, stood between them, arms out, screaming for peace. But both sides ignored him. They fired. They destroyed the sky. Then darkness. Nothing. Silence. And the child, alone in ashes. Back in the courtroom, the vision faded. The child's voice returned, quiet, trembling. That is one future, but it doesn't have to happen. Please, don't choose fear. The room stayed silent for a long time. Some cried. Some shook. Some looked at the floor in shame. But just as hope began to rise, a blast shook the station. Red alarms screamed. Doors locked. Draven and Zira were thrown to the floor as guards rushed in. On the screen, a face appeared. General Moss. He was in command of an armed ship, Point Omega, hovering outside the trial station. He had seen enough. Too late for speeches, he said coldly. This ends now. The judges screamed. Ships locked onto each other. Peacekeepers tried to stop the fight, but Moss had a secret weapon. He activated it. The Omega clone, the dark version of the child, appeared in the courtroom, dropped in by teleport. Its eyes glowed red. It moved fast, too fast, straight toward the real child. Zira screamed. Draven smashed the glass wall with his fist. The real child didn't move. He stared at the clone. "Why are you doing this?" he asked gently. The clone didn't answer. But it hesitated. Just for a second. That second was enough. The child stepped forward and hugged it. No one understood. No one expected it. But the clone stopped moving. Its red eyes faded. It looked down at its hands, confused, afraid. "I don't have a name," it said softly. The child whispered, "You can have mine." And then, the clone vanished. It didn't die. It simply glowed and disappeared. Peacefully. The attack stopped. General Moss shouted orders, but no one listened anymore. His own crew turned off his weapons. He was arrested for war crimes against peace. The courtroom was silent. Then the head judge stood. He looked at the child. "Your trial is over," he said. "You are not guilty. You are our future." Outside, the stars shone brighter. For the first time in hundreds of years, there was no war in the galaxy. Just one question remained. What would this child become next? The baby who changed the stars. The stars were quiet. Not dark, not cold. Just quiet. As if the universe itself had stopped to breathe. After the trial, after the clone vanished, and after the warships left the courtroom in silence, something new had begun. For the first time in galactic memory, humans and aliens did not look at each other as enemies, but as echoes of the same creation. And it all began with one impossible child. A child born of love. A child born of two worlds. A child who, for the first time, had changed the stars. Inside a white room floating above the Echo Temple ruins, Draven sat beside a small cradle. He didn't speak. He just watched. His son slept peacefully. No glowing, no energy surges, just soft breathing. The child was still, but the galaxy was moving because of him. Zira entered quietly, her hand on the glass wall. eyes tired but calm. "He hasn't made a sound all day," she said softly. "He's tired," Draven replied. "He did more in a week than most do in a lifetime." They both smiled, but their hearts carried the weight of what came next. News from across the galaxy poured in. On Earth, once strict leaders stepped down. A new council was formed, half alien, half human. On alien homeworlds, temples opened doors once closed for centuries. Prophecies were rewritten. Sentient machines began walking freely, not as tools, but as beings with names, emotions, and rights. Hidden hybrid children, once feared or abandoned, were brought into the light, loved, celebrated. They called it the Starborn Era. But for the child, none of that mattered. He wasn't a god. He wasn't a symbol. He was a child. He liked stars and stories and the way Zyra sang at night. He liked when Draven carried him on his shoulders. He liked when people smiled instead of feared. And in his heart, he knew his mission wasn't over. One night, he woke up, not crying, not scared, just aware. He walked alone to the top of the Echo Temple. The air shimmered around him. The stars pulsed gently. A voice echoed, not from outside, but from within. "You have opened the door, little one." It was the voice of the first beings, the ones who created the Echo Core. "You have done what we could not." You reminded them what they have forgotten, that everything is one. The child didn't speak. He just listened. And then the stars shifted. A portal opened, but it wasn't made of fire or noise. It was light. Warm, living light. A path. To what? No one knew. Not even the child. But he felt it. This was the next step, not for war, not for escape, but for becoming more. Draven and Zyra arrived moments later, breathless. "What is this?" Zyra whispered. The child turned and smiled. "I need to go," he said. Draven dropped to his knees. "Why? You just got here." The child took both their hands. "So others can come. There are more like me. Out there. Scared. Alone. Waiting. I can show them it's okay to be different. To belong." Tears filled Zyra's eyes. "But you're just a baby." He leaned forward and kissed her cheek. "I was never just a baby," he whispered. He looked at Draven. "I am your son, but I belong to the stars too." The light grew brighter. Other shapes appeared, small at first. Other children, different, glowing. Like him. They reached out. He stepped forward. Draven tried to hold him back, but couldn't. Zyra let go, slowly, her heart breaking and blooming at the same time. "We love you," she whispered. "I know," the child replied. "That's why I can go." He smiled, and then he turned and walked into the light. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. And then, a wave of soft energy passed through everything. Humans, aliens, machines, planets. Peace. Clarity. Oneness. 10 years later, a statue stood in the galactic center. Not of a warrior, not of a king, but of a child. Small, smiling, with arms open. Below it, carved in simple letters, "Born of two worlds, belonging to all." And far, far away, on a quiet planet surrounded by blue clouds, a boy with silver eyes taught other children how to light stars with their hands. He told them stories about a place called Earth, and a temple full of old songs, and two people who loved him enough to let him go. And every night, he looked up at the stars, and the stars smiled back. Because once, a baby was born. A baby they tried to erase. A baby who refused to be silent. A baby who reminded everyone. That love is the only thing powerful enough to rewrite reality.